1977, Meryl and her fiancé John Cazale were both cast in The Deer Hunter, Michael Cimino's disturbing look at the aftermath of the Vietnam War. But shortly before filming was set to start, John got some terrible news. He was diagnosed with bone cancer. His prognosis was terminal.
Michael Cimino, the director, still wanted him for the film, tried to hide the fact that he was sick, but the financiers found out, tried to get him to recast the role. He refused, threatened to quit the project. Meryl Streep also threatened to quit the project.
We signed letters off. If this film stopped because of John, because of his death, we would not claim any more pay or anything like that.
They worked around the fact that he was a very ill man while he was making that film. They shot all of his scenes first because they knew that he was falling away, really, and they needed to get it done.
In light of John's illness, the small cast of The Deer Hunter became their own band of brothers, as they tried to deal with, and laugh about, not only the specter of death in Vietnam, but its very real presence right there in their midst.
He'd crack people up. She would crack people up. She was able to give him the strength, I felt, and courage to continue working.
Meryl and John's parts were completed in 6 weeks, and they moved back to their New York apartment, where Meryl put her career on hold and did everything she could to keep up John's spirits.
John was very sick, and Meryl was really there for him. Al Pacino told me that he'd never seen such love as what Meryl showed for John.
She was in the hospital with him the whole time. She was right there by his side.
John never got to see his performance in The Deer Hunter. He died on March 12, 1978, less than a year after being diagnosed. He was 42 years old.
Meryl said she was shocked that John died. I think she was too close to it. She was with him every day. She didn't really see the deterioration, and she didn't expect it.
Meryl got another shock a few days later when she was evicted from the apartment she shared with John because her name wasn't on the lease. Grieving and homeless, she accepted an offer by one of her brother's friends to sublet his loft while he was out of the country.
It actually ended up being a really beautiful love story out of this terrible tragedy. She was kicked out of the apartment that she had been renting with John Cazale, and her brother suggested that she move into the apartment of a friend of his named Don Gummer.
Don Gummer was a sculptor who was spending the summer studying art in Europe. He ended up coming home earlier than planned, and he and Meryl found their destiny. On September 15, 1978, a few months after they met, Meryl and Don Gummer were married in her parents' backyard on Mason's Island in Connecticut. More than 30 years later, they're still together.
She once said that she was born to be married, she was born to have a family. That's something she always knew that she'd have.
Mainly, I want to thank Don, my husband, 30 years for
I asked her about Don. What was it like to be married to a civilian? She said, well, you know, he's not an actor, but he's not a civilian. He's an artist. He's a creative person, and he understands what making something from nothing is all about.
The Deer Hunter was a hit when it was released in December 1978, and Meryl ended up nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. When she turned up next, starring in the drama Kramer vs. Kramer opposite Dustin Hoffman, most people thought the role had been written for Meryl. But the truth was, the role of Joanna Kramer was a part she was never supposed to have had.
But Meryl Streep was actually supposed to have a very small part in Kramer vs. Kramer. She was supposed to be Dustin Hoffman's one-night stand. Kate Jackson was going to be Joanna Kramer. And then she couldn't get out of her Charlie's Angels contract. Can you imagine?
Meryl Streep wasn't the first choice for the part, but she came in and she blew Dustin Hoffman away.
Even before filming started, Meryl thought Kramer vs. Kramer's story, or at least her end of it, wasn't realistic.
I wanted to portray someone whose mental instability and emotional frailty was so precarious that she would do this thing, that she would leave a kid. And I had to understand it myself in order to play it.
She insisted that we know something about this woman, her fragility, her reasons for leaving.
Meryl shared her concerns with Kramer vs. Kramer's writer-director Robert Benton, who appreciated her input. But co-star Dustin Hoffman let everyone know he was unhappy about Meryl's contributions.
In any movie where Dustin Hoffman plays a